And we're back, part two. So where we left off, I mentioned Mick Mars, right, playing lead guitar, and you get some background based on the dirt of why he was such an excellent musician, and a lot of his background comes from blues. So again, it's not necessarily linked to this show, but you get an understanding of who they were, and that's how impactful they were to pop culture. That they took on these personalities that mimicked very much, I mean, they just had it going on. It was an incredible kick-ass band, and when you're that level of power, you think you're untouchable. And then here we have Tommy, who rounds out the four, who incredible musician, kick-ass drummer, can do these aerobatics while he's playing drums to keep a beat and to be upside down. I mean, he did incredible things, stemming, and he was in a band early on. Like he was like in a band in this band and like from 19 to now. This is all he knows. So, and again, that's why I suggest you guys to watch The Dirt so you have an understanding of where this ego comes from. Again, no shade. I've seen recent interviews, and I think life lessons have perhaps humbled him, and he seems like a really sweet guy. All that talent is an aphrodisiac for a number of women, for fans, and that's why he was able to pull the amount of women that he has in his life. Not to mention the arm that's sitting between his legs, but that's neither here nor there. And Pamela Anderson, I mean, come on, she was at the epitome of her career with Baywatch. They went to syndication. They made worldwide attention. Who didn't know the famous bathing suit, the uniform, right, that they donned while they were doing this show, and your heart kind of goes out to her because, unfortunately, because it was like a double-edged sword. For being beautiful, millions of opportunities were given to her, but also she was met with just being put in this little box that like she couldn't necessarily, jump out of, or like nobody wanted to take her serious, and much less take her on for a serious role. And she really wanted to. I mean, she pressed for that while she was on the show. There's so many other documentaries too, that in case you guys are curious and you want to find out like backstories um, of Baywatch and all those like major 90s and 80s um, sitcoms or shows. I believe it's called The Dark Side of the 90s, also on Hulu, and it gives you a background. But it also lets you know how male and how over decades, a span of decades of how male dominated these shows were. And yes, they guaranteed a female, very much like Pamela Anderson, an incredible career. She went from obscurity to being the most famous woman on the planet, but they objectified her based on her aesthetic, her appearance. There's a scene, I believe, in that particular episode, I Love You, Tommy, that she was stretching out her wings and she really wanted to have a speaking role on Baywatch and not just be TNA. And they were like, oh no, because they knew their core base, and their core base were just, mostly disgusting guys that just wanted to look at her. They didn't really want to hear what she had to say. Um, so you have an understanding of who they are as a couple. And though from the first episode, they both seem very obnoxious, and it could come off like that. Those can be first impressions, even though people can argue and say, well, they're just making them look like villains and justifying what this guy did in terms of stealing Rand, right, that stole the tape, justifying what he did because they were such assholes to him. You do have a consensus of who they are, more or less. And again, they are not pulling from the air. They're thin air. They're taking account interviews and taking account the written word that these people have published. So you had to have okayed those published books for it to even sell. So this is my point. So if people are getting upset, take it upon your publishers because you okayed what was in those books, and you gave the account that yes, those were factual. So anyway, but you kind of feel for Pam after a while, because you kind of see like, look, it's just a tougher game when it comes to these videos. The woman usually is the person that is more objectified. That's just society across the board. Women are just seen more as meat, and men, even though regardless of what they're doing this almost the same act. The guy is revered and the woman is always slammed. And you can see the worry once she realizes that the tape is gone, that her career could buckle, something like that. We're talking about, remember, this is the 90s, like mid 90s, and it wasn't so far off. This is why American pop culture is very important for you to know as you're watching this, because this was the mid 90s and we weren't so far from the 80s. And I believe it was a scandal. Okay, I just want people to know, like, who are watching this and maybe perhaps are not of my generation and are younger. Kim Kardashian and that family have made millions off of these scandals, right? Kim Kardashian was a household name soon after her sex tape, right? And Pam and Tommy is the granddaddy, okay, of sex tapes, because it was the first most successful sex tape that actually was known, went worldwide in popularity. Now, Kim was able to leverage that into a billion success, and her sisters were to leverage that as well, with their introduction of a reality TV show. But that wasn't the case around Pamela Anderson's when she was popular, when she was known for her acting. You did not want that scandal. That was a no-no. That was an end to your career. Vanessa Williams, and this is why I was relating to the 80s, because the late 1980s, Vanessa Williams, who now she is a really well-known actress, but because she came out, and I believe in one of those, I don't think she was on the cover. I think she was a centerfold in Playboy magazine, which again, Playboy was always the most, if you could call it PG of flesh magazines in comparison to other magazines. It was the most, it was like nicely done, right? Like through a photographic perspective. It wasn't like raunch. So people wanted to be in Playboy. And so she was in, I think she was the centerfold for some particular issue. And once Miss USA found out that she had been in that, she lost her crown. She lost her crown. She had won. She had won that year. She lost her crown because you didn't want scandal attached to your name. So again, if you are privy to that information, then you understand why the worry is in Pamela Anderson's eyes when she's like, what do you mean the tape's missing? This is going to end my career. And I so much want to be, well respected. And even regardless of how she's popping out of her, uniform. And then, of course, this is around the time that she had done the movie Barbed Wire, which she thought was going to be her breakout role. And it kind of mirrored other movies. If you're familiar with Cherry 2000, I think it was more or less that. I mean, of course, they changed it up a bit. It's not like, because Melanie Griffith is the lead in that particular film, and I still like it. I recommend it too. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it. I think it's kind of telling of where we're going, even for this generation. Even though this is like a 80s, early 90s movie. I think it's 1987 though. It gives you an indication where we're going today. But anyway, she plays a bounty hunter, and she's in search of some robotic caring for some crazy client that she has. And in Barbed Wire, she's not necessarily doing that. Hold on a second. In Barbed Wire, she's a bounty hunter, but she's in search of something else. And I can't say I've watched Barbed Wire 100%. I've seen clips, but they kind of mirror each other from, my perspective and being the film nerd that I like to call myself. So, but nonetheless, I'm sure it put a damper. It's not like it was great acting anyway. I'm sorry, Pammy, but it wasn't. I think the sex tape didn't really kind of help. It didn't help much. She had to, unfortunately, when she was doing the press for Barbed Wire, it was now attached to the notoriety that was the infamous sex tape that she had with her husband. Which, not for nothing, side note, I did see it years later. I didn't see it, obviously, when it first was hitting the web. Because who the hell was going to pay $60 for a freaking shitty tape of them, whatever. But nonetheless, when I saw it, it was kind of sweet. I mean, of course, they do the raunchiest of things, but they were in love. They were like newlyweds. And again, be careful what you do, how you go about, and how you move in your personal life, because you don't know how it can bite you in the behind. But it just goes to show, too, how things change, because years later, it made careers for people, and now people don't even care. Now it's kind of like, oh, okay, but maybe some people will watch, and people accidentally leak. But see, this is what I'll say. When I do this too, like, we were all under the impression that they had leaked it, and now we see that no, they hadn't. They didn't make any money off of that. And it's them. There's no more of a bigger slap in the face than them having an intimate act and say that we're doing it for the sole purpose of making money, and they made zero profit off of it. When you do your research, you'll find out that the tape itself, the content of itself, made about $77 million, if not more. And that's all that was actually on record. You don't even know how much money it made underground. And that's all attributed to our thief, Rand Gauthier, who was the worker that was jilted and not getting paid, and he is basically the reason why that thing went viral, if you could call it viral for that time stamp, because there was no such thing as the internet. It was growing. There was the first glimmer of what the internet was and would soon become. But he thought it was a great way, almost like a black market. And I think for a while it happened. You could put anything that you wanted. It wasn't regulated. The internet had to be regulated with years soon after. Cases like this were known and were made public, and they had to go to court for this stuff because obviously they wanted to fight for this. They were like, hey, this is a very intimate thing that we did not purposely leak onto the public. We didn't want the public to see, and people should be served charges for that. So soon after that, I think that's when the internet was better regulated. That now you can't do that. You can't do that crap now and think you could get away with it. I mean, even when you even register to all these apps, you have to put make sure you have your dots and your T's crossed, because now you cannot just have straight up anonymity and think you're going to put anything up in the internet. And that's attributed to this. So even though, we're very much, in the thick of what we think we're getting in terms of it's going to be raunchy, their love affair. But where we're actually getting a better understanding, and yes, we do get those sex scenes. I mean, this is not for family viewing, let's just say. This is a very hot and steamy date night, with your partner, whomever you want to share this sexy viewing. It is one of those simulated, but nonetheless, it's very steamy. But what we're essentially seeing is an American crime story. So in the same vein of maybe perhaps a Ryan Murphy with the O.J. Simpson case and the Versace case, this is not under the umbrella of Ryan Murphy. But I believe I already mentioned his name, the creator for I, Tonya. Robert Siegel. But we're still essentially, and we're having a better understanding of who these people are. Rand, the Gautier, the one that stole the tape, though he essentially looks like he's doing very well for himself, I tried to do more research and it didn't fare well for him. He ended up not getting what he thought he was going to get. And, he falls into semi life of crime before he moved on and somehow was cleared. I don't know how the hell. I have to watch more of these episodes to see how the hell is it that he got to clear his name. But I believe he went into kind of some kind of home security kind of thing, and that's his bread and butter today. But nonetheless, I think it has opened the door for curiosity, and not for nothing too. These actors, I mean, what can be said? I mean, did you know that Pamela Anderson is being played by a Brit? Her name is Lily James, and if you know her from, I think it was a recent contemporary spin to Cinderella, she's British, and she does an impeccable job of Tommy. Also, our gangster mafioso of Andrew Dice Clay. Andrew! Oh, hey, remember that? He's in here playing the mafioso, but again, incredible job. And then Sebastian Stan is playing Tommy. I honestly don't see the actors. I honestly, in certain scenes, they genuinely do look like Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee. And the same goes for Netflix, The Dirt, which is based on Tommy's also his band life. And the guy that plays Nikki Sixx, Douglas Booth, he's British, and he did an awesome job as Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx was hot back then. He is hot. Again, that's why I say I think both should be watched. Just out of curiosity, if you really want to see and have more of an understanding of who they were as a group, where that ego came from. I'm curious to see how now this next set of episodes, because like I said, there's 8 episodes in this series. I'm very curious of how they're going to handle these characters. But yeah, it is currently streaming on Hulu. I'm excited. I think it makes really great TV watching for date night for Valentine's Day. And on my meter, my Valentine's Day meter, all current 3 episodes that I've watched, I gotta watch the new ones. They just released, so I'm already late to the party. But honey, if there was one that said like ultra hot, it goes all the way there. So yes,